While millions of people are shouting at their screens, smearing their faces with team colors, and getting emotionally shattered because 11 strangers lost a game, there's an enormous group of people who truly could not care less. And according to neuroscience, their brains might actually be built differently. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share will entirely transform how you see the sports-obsessed individuals in your life. Here's the reality nobody really discusses. Not caring about sports doesn't make you uninteresting. It doesn't mean you lack enthusiasm, and it definitely doesn't signal that something is wrong with you. But there is something genuinely interesting going on inside your brain that separates you from the roughly 60% of Americans who follow sports with an almost spiritual intensity. Let's begin with the obvious question. Why do so many people care so much? Humans are tribal creatures. For thousands of years, being part of a group meant survival. Your tribe protected you from predators, helped you hunt, kept you alive, and sports, they're basically modern tribes with better merchandise. When someone watches their team, their brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the same chemical that makes you love your family. Wild, right? Their brain literally tricks them into thinking these millionaire athletes are part of their clan. But here's where it gets interesting. People who don't obsess over sports often have what psychologists call lower tribal instincts. Their identity isn't as strongly tied to being part of a group. They're more individualistic. They're more likely to say, I don't need to belong to something bigger to feel complete. And there's legitimate research backing this up. A 2019 study showed that individuals with low sports engagement displayed significantly reduced us versus them cognition. In plain language, they don't automatically detest the opposing team simply because they're wearing a different uniform. But wait, this gets even stranger. Because what occurs inside the brain of an extreme sports fan during a match is, quite honestly, slightly disturbing. You know that little rush of excitement when you're about to unwrap a gift? That's dopamine being released. Sports fans experience that exact same neurochemical spike throughout a game. Every move, every possession, constant miniature bursts of anticipation and payoff. It's genuinely addictive. Brain scan research reveals that watching your team activates the same reward pathways linked to gambling and other intensely compelling activities. And here's the critical piece. The unpredictability is what powers it. You don't know the final score. That uncertainty keeps dopamine pumping. This is intermittent reinforcement, the single most addictive reward schedule identified by psychology. The identical mechanism that makes slot machines so disturbingly effective. The process is eerily similar to other behavioral dependencies. Your brain doesn't distinguish much between different dopamine triggers. It simply demands more. People who don't care about sports, their dopamine architecture just isn't activated by vicarious competition. And this might be genetic. Research from the University of Chicago suggests that variations in dopamine receptor genes can predict how strongly someone reacts to competitive spectator activities. Let that settle. Your total apathy toward whether the Yankees win or lose could literally be written into your DNA. That's not a personality flaw, that's biology. But there's another compelling layer. Sports fans undergo something called BIRGing, basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they proclaim, "We won." When their team loses, suddenly it's, "They lost." Notice the subtle shift in pronouns. People who don't obsess over sports are far less likely to engage in this psychological retreat. They tend to maintain a more consistent self-concept. Their self-esteem isn't tethered to external triumphs they can't control. Their sense of worth is more stable, less reactive to outcomes that sit entirely outside their influence. Now, before the comment section explodes, I'm not arguing that one path is superior, but I am highlighting that there are real psychological differences, and understanding them is absolutely fascinating. Here's a twist that seems contradictory. Sports fans frequently test higher on certain empathy scales. They actively practice caring deeply about somebody else's hardship, even if that person is a complete stranger wearing their squad's jersey. So why don't non-sports people experience that same surge of empathy for athletes? The explanation lies in empathy allocation. Every human has a finite capacity for deep emotional investment. People who aren't into sports often redirect that empathy into entirely different channels: social advocacy, intimate relationships, creative expression, intellectual exploration. A 2021 study discovered that individuals with low sports interest scored substantially higher in openness to experience and appreciation for art and beauty. They're sourcing their emotional peaks from music, painting, nature, and transformative ideas. Their brains are pursuing the same fundamental rewards, meaning, bonding, moments of transcendence. They're just harvesting them from different places. And let's be truthful about something else. For some people, disinterest in sports is actually a protective adaptation. Maybe they were the last kid picked in gym class. Maybe they felt alienated by sports culture during their formative years. Maybe they're quietly resisting the aggressive competitiveness that often saturates fan communities. Or perhaps they just never understood why rational adults scream at televisions over a ball. Indifference can have a backstory, or maybe you simply find it boring. Both are entirely valid, but here's the insight that clarifies so much about why sports fans and non-fans sometimes can't comprehend each other. It comes down to how you construct meaning. Sports fans find profound meaning in narrative, the underdog story, the impossible comeback, the dynasty, the bitter rivalry. It's gripping precisely because it's unscripted, real-life drama with authentic emotional stakes. People who don't care about sports often view that unpredictability as meaningless chaos. They ask, why would I emotionally invest in an outcome I can't influence, performed by strangers, in a contest that doesn't alter my actual life? They're not incorrect, but neither are the fans. It's simply two distinct approaches to the universal human craving for story and significance. One group locates epic narrative in a championship run, the other discovers it in a novel, a friendship, a painting, a scientific breakthrough. Psychologists describe this as the difference between parasocial investment and direct engagement. Sports fans build one-sided emotional bonds with teams and athletes. Non-sports people prefer to invest their emotional currency where there's actual reciprocity, where their care influences the outcome, where they're involved participants rather than passive observers. Neither strategy is superior. They're just different roadmaps for navigating the human condition. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who dedicated his career to studying optimal experience, demonstrated that flow states, those moments of complete immersive absorption, can be achieved through an almost infinite variety of activities. For some, it's watching a live contest. For others, it's practically anything else. And this is where the distinction becomes almost philosophical. Flow is flow, whether it arrives through sport or sculpture, through a stadium roar, or a silent studio. And here's what's quietly powerful. People who don't obsess over sports often report a deeper sense of presence in their own lives. They're not surrendering 3 hours every Sunday to witnessing someone else's drama. They're living their own. They're writing their own narrative instead of outsourcing it to a franchise. There's something quietly revolutionary about that decision. It's not detachment, it's a different kind of engagement altogether. So what does all this mean? If you don't care about sports, you aren't missing out on some essential human ritual. You're simply calibrated differently. Your brain's reward circuitry, your tribal instincts, your empathy distribution, they're all tuned to a unique frequency, and that is completely okay. The next time someone asks, "Did you catch the game?" and you genuinely could not care less, remember, you're not broken, you're not dull, you're just playing a different sport, one that might, just perhaps, have higher stakes. If this connected with you, you'll probably find it fascinating. Why quiet people process information in a fundamentally different way than everyone else, and why that might be your greatest hidden advantage. Tap one of these videos to discover why you think a little differently than the crowd.